Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we were playing as the Tomb Kings against the force of the Greenskins. And I do believe this is the Tomb of the Shifting Sands. And I wanted to try something a little different in this matchup. Normally if I go in with Tomb Kings, or honestly almost any faction against Greenskins, monster spam is often a very effective counter. Even with the changes, even with the way WoW works right now and all that sort of stuff, monsters still really dumpster Greenskins with their bad leadership and trouble to really duke it out with those units. But I think infantry heavy can work, and the main trick up my sleeve, the ace up my sleeve here, is Grand Hierophant Katep, Grandpa Katep, as he's often called. And why? Well, Grandpa Katep has this ability here, the Lich Staff. And this is, whenever he casts, plus 15 ability recharge. This means that as long as I'm spamming spells, and these are largely dirt cheap, well, not largely, I guess. I've only got one dirt cheap spell here, Nare's Incantation of Protection. But as long as I'm casting spells, I am penalizing my opponent. I'm denying him his cooldowns. For normal magic, that's not the end of the world, but definitely for WoW, which you need to be in melee to activate, that is a huge debuff. And it's got no cooldown, it's got no penalties, it's just very easy to get off. Alongside that, of course, as long as you're casting, you do have the Restless Dead, which is granting constant heals to this very infantry-heavy army, which I think is really cool. Otherwise, Grandpa Katep does have quite a roster of spells. Of course, Lord of Nakara is, in my opinion, pretty solid. You've got basically an AoE Enfeebling Foe here with the Usef's Incantation of Desiccation. You've got Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance, which I figured would be decent to slow enemies, cavalry especially. Sandstorm, which is of course his bound spell, and its Vortex does okay against unarmored targets. And then of course we do have Arcane Conduit, so all in all pretty solid. For the rest of the army, well, we've got two Tomb Princes acting as an anti-large escort. These guys also do have some cool debuffs of their own. They've got Blade of Setep, which is a debuff to armor and fizz resist. Tomb Strike, which causes tear, great against the Greenskins, of course, who are very susceptible to leadership bombs. And then Curse of Jaff, which is a cool melee attack debuff and rampage effect that you can afflict a pretty significant area with. And as long as you're under 50% HP, but still very useful spell or ability in my opinion. And of course, these guys also do have the Guardian trait, or at least one of them does, to help protect Katep. Now for a front line here, doubled up Tomb Guard. These guys are slightly chevroned up, with 3 chevrons because that's some spare points, and the Kepra Guard. These guys will not win against, say, Black Orcs, but against everything else they will do rather well, and especially the Kepra Guard will just mulch through things like Savage Orc Bigons or Orc Boys. They really don't stand much of a chance. Well, on the flanks we do have some Skeleton Warriors, as well as Skeleton Spears all over the periphery. No King Nikesh's Scorpion Legion, because I was trying to keep things on a budget, essentially. But these guys, obviously, they're not going to do well against most Greenskin units, but against these wide goblins, for example, or against Goblin Wolf Riders, they will hold up rather well. Finally, for our main killing force, especially if my opponent had, say, decided to go with Black Orcs, we do have 4 units of Skeleton Archers, as well as the Blessed Legion of Demonetization. With 5 models firing, you will melt Black Orcs, despite their armor, especially if you hit them with Blade of Setep from the Tomb Prince. It is destructive as all get out. Now for my opponent, he went super wide here. He did bring the Baconator, the Pig Lord, Wardsag himself here riding along. He's got Foot of Gork, which I think is not good against the Tomb Kings, if I'm to be quite blunt here. I think you're better off just using cheaper spells. The Tomb Kings don't have elite units to target with Foot of Gork. It's all either big units or monsters which are not that susceptible, or infantry where it's just pure, or cheap infantry where it's just overkill. Here we go, great AoE buff. Fists of Gork, of course, another great melee attack buff, and Brain Burst. And of course, as long as he does have his Bonewood Staff here, he's got a mini WoW that he's proccing constantly. He also does a Wardsag's Revenge, Warpaint of Wardsag, WoW, Get Back Here, and the Effigy of the Git. So pretty nasty kit. For the front line, my opponent brought a bunch of Orc Boys, backed by some Goblins all around, so definitely looking to swamp me from all sides, and a horde of Savage Orc Big Guns, which are just brutal in this matchup. 6 units of Savage Orc Big Guns will be able to crush the Tomb Guard, especially if they get a WoW off, and really get into the back line, get into the Cookie Jar. Things like Skeleton Warriors do not stand a chance. My opponent's Wolf Riders, of course, are immediately trying to posture and get into the back line, so we're going to have to start pivoting our spears back shortly to try to counter them. My opponent also does have an Orc Shaman, which is a bit of an interesting choice here. I'm not entirely sure why he brought him, perhaps for the leadership. He does have Encourage, of course, and he does have Power of the Wall and an additional Here We Go, so potentially a huge amount of buffs going down. Now, you can see here, I do actually cast the Nare's Incantation of Protection, largely wasted on this unit of Tomb Guard, but I just wanted to make sure WoW would not go off, which is just key here. Meantime, as my opponent is posturing on the flanks, you can see I'm keeping my Tomb Princes in reserve over here and over here, ready to sort of counterattack. And shortly, the archers will start unloading. You can see the Kepra Guard here and the Tomb Guard are going to be able to pile in and start doing some damage. My opponent is using Here We Go here, but that is an incredibly expensive spell going down. And while he will be able to sort of mulch through this Tomb Guard, he is going to take a huge pounding from these archers. He's getting clumped up, which is really bad, and we're countering a bit with Yusuf's Incantation of Desiccation, so really some rough stuff. You can see one of those sandstorms going down, melting through those troops, some really brutal action there. And although my opponent is sort of crushing through these Tomb Guard, we're able to hold out okay, and you can see the Orc boys here struggling a bit, and you know, the Tomb Guard will hold okay, and we are going to throw in now with the Tomb Princes, going after Wartsag, trying to pressure him back, and force him to reconsider his life decisions. In the meantime, the archers are going to be able to start pounding into the center pocket, and of course, because of that great debuff from Yusuf's Incantation of Desiccation, as well as that Vortex, this flank is breaking. The Savage Rogue Big Guns are in full flight, and some, you know, they've been snared over here on Spears and Skeleton Warriors, and although they are crushing through these Tomb Guard, the Kepler Guard is still going strong, 30 models, and just crunching through these troops. Balance power though, dead center, but you can see we are going to force Wartsag back over here. We do have the Blade of Setep active on him, so he's getting absolutely demolished. He is really being forced to reconsider his life choices. And the Wolf Riders now, they are getting in. But we do have the Tomb Prince here who does have Tomb Strike active. And of course, these guys with their trash leadership are not going to hold up well at all. Certainly, they are getting into the cookie jar here, doing a bit of damage to the skeletons. But with good old Grand Hierophant and these debuffs going down, of course, my opponent's still not able to get off. And we're going to be able to just force these guys off with terror routes and damage and all that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, these Savage Rogue Big Guns are breaching the backline, so we're forced to pull our spears in there. But Wartsag himself forced off, so the Hoglord are definitely looking a little sad, forced to run. Shop the Summon going down over here and helping deflect this push. And the archers, you know, they're still around kicking. They still got over half their ammo, and they are raining death and destruction on these lightly armored, poorly defended troops. And you can see the Tomb Prince here helping hold the line. Grandpa Katep here swinging out, coming after Wartsag, and he's not a good combatant, but hey, Wartsag doesn't have good melee defense either, so I was looking to perhaps get in there before reconsidering. After all, Wartsag does have effigy, which I don't want to be on the receiving end of. In the meantime, it is a bit of a game of catch here on the periphery. My opponent has a lot to micro, but I do need to be very careful with these Goblin Wolf Riders. And you can see I'm trying to force them off with the Skeleton Spears, using my Tomb Prince here to chase off these Goblin Wolf Riders, and trying to make the best use of my archers here, pouring into these Savage Rogue Big Guns, ignoring the Goblins, and just trying to eradicate these very threatening troops. And the thing is, Savage Rogue Big Guns, while an incredibly brutal unit, especially on the charge, if you can remove their frenzy and start drag them into a protracted fight, they start suffering quite a bit. You can see here their leadership is starting to waver a bit. Over here, 2 units of goblins caught up on a single unit of spears. So definitely some slight misplay there from my opponent. And the poor Godwork Shaman here in full flight, running away from the Tomb Prince, who then postures to go after Wartsag, who's sitting here looking pretty, and is now getting shanked in the back by the very angry Tomb Prince. And he is not having a good day. Wartsag doesn't have good melee defense, only 25. He's going to be forced to retreat. And yeah, he's in for a world of hurt. Now, my opponent is able to isolate and ambush and kill, you know, spears there. Certainly, he is constantly threatening me with the Goblin Wolf Riders and just being a general menace. But at this stage of the game, I do still have a very healthy Tomb Prince over here who can cause, of course, terror, which is just huge. I do still have this Tomb Prince over there. Wartsag's still being forced back. He does cast an Here We Go here, but that's largely wasted against a single Tomb Prince. And we're just able to force these troops into full retreat all over the line. And certainly we're down on our infantry, but still, you know, healthy unit of spears over here, 2 okay units of spears over there, the Kepler Guard around and kicking somewhere. They're over here kicking some serious Orc Tail. And although our Tomb Prince at this point is going down and he actually gets hit by an effigy, it's, you know, a little too late. I didn't actually get my Curse of Joff there, but although my opponent is able to snipe the Tomb Prince there, and he does get his wall finally after ages, it's just too late, guys. At this stage of the game, he's in full retreat. Our spears are rallying. We're pushing back to the front. Certainly, we still have 2 archers and the Legion ready to go and still pouring in. Of course, Katep still intact, and I do believe he still has a cast of... He still has a cast of the Vortex ready to go. Wartsag here in full flight, trying to escape, but he is a little slower than Katep. So Katep on his horse, you know, as we know, he's the greatest assassin here in the game. And you can see a sandstorm here about to go down on this pocket. I'm not entirely sure if it does very much. It does kind of wander around. It actually messes up these goblins really bad. Katep actually up to 132 kills. And at this stage of the game, my opponent's army is going to start buckling. Once again, the spears here do intercept the Savage Rogue Big Guns. At this point, because they're so beaten up, they're losing frenzy and all that, they're not going to be able to hold that well. We've got this Tomb Prince coming back in. He's on 30 kills, looking real good. Grandpa Katep here, slugging out with Wartsag, which, you know, a bit of a sad fight, but Grandpa, you know, he does hit sometimes. He's got 28 melee attack, it's 25 melee defense. But my opponent's army does shatter at this point, giving the Tomb Kings the victory. Now, is this a composition I would recommend, per se? No, probably not. I don't No, I don't think that going mass infantry is necessarily better against the Greenskins than going with a lot of monsters, especially if you've got Grandpa Katep in there. Certainly Grandpa Katep can heal your troops up, and that's very nifty, but especially when you get these double buffs, which my opponent did here, and it was a cool idea. I don't think it worked out quite the way he wanted, but with this sort of mob tactics, it can be difficult. Had my opponent been a little more, I think, on top of microing and swamping my backline, things could have gotten very grim, because he had a lot of CQC units here. He could have kept Warsack pretty safe, I think, from the Tomb Princes, and I think he could have just kind of swarmed all over me. Because he had, 6 units of Savage Big Guns. That's easily enough to take on my front line. Could have just swamped or shut down units with the Goblins, and then swamped the back lines with Goblin Wolf Riders. Now, I would have been very hard-pressed to counter all of that. But because my opponent kind of fed into that funnel in the center, got blobbed up, it played out well for me. But I wouldn't necessarily suggest it. I think you're probably better off bringing, say, a few Shopti Great Bows if you need to pressure your opponent, and then sort of bring Katep and a pocket of monsters and Tomb Guard, and I think you'll be better served with that sort of composition. Especially with, say, Hyrule Titans, because especially with Spear Leech, Hyrule Titans are just disgusting. I do believe they can actually one-shot Black Orcs with each tick, which does matter. If you get a Spear Leech on a unit of Black Orcs, you can knock off like 9 models or something, which isn't bad. If you get it on a Lord, if you manage to hit Warsack or something, you can easily just level him pretty nastily there. But yeah, the Blessed Legion, the archers here did a lot of work. Definitely a lot of damage. The Kepler Guard is just brutal against Greenskins, as long as they're not getting munched down by a Wa. But yeah, it was fun. It was cool to try something a little different. I'm not usually one to necessarily go super wide builds against Greenskins, because I do feel like it plays into their hands. But I did have some fun here, and I think Katep can make it work. For my opponent's build, a cool idea with the Orc Shaman and Warsack. I think the biggest mistake here was probably the fact that my opponent just didn't micro adequately. But I think that if you're going in against Tomb Kings, you really need some AP. This build that doesn't look necessarily bad, and especially against this build that I brought it, I think it's actually well put together. But if you're dealing with if it's the Tomb King opponent who brings a lot of monsters, this build is not going to hold up too well. You're going to get bogged down in a drawn-out engagement against Chaff and Trash. If there's a Shopti in there, especially if there's Hyrule Titans in there or Schnecker Sphinxes, these units will not be able to hold. You're going to start having leadership issues. You're potentially going to have routes. I think you always want at least 1 or 2 units of Black Orcs in there to really hold things together. Or otherwise, units that can more effectively swamp the flanks. I think Savage Orcs, for example, are probably better actually than Goblins, because Goblins are a little slower. Goblins don't hit as hard, so they're going to get bogged down much more easily by Trash. So from that perspective, I think you're better off with going with, say, Savage Orc Big Guns and then some Savage Orcs and something like that. I don't think the Chaff is that good against such a fear and terror causing faction like the Tomb Kings. Regardless, well played to your brother over here. Had a lot of fun, and I thought it was a pretty entertaining fight. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, do not hesitate to post them. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.